All right, so I wanted to go over some basic drawing, some basic 2D drawing. I wanted to show you guys how to get some images into Rhino so you can import JPEGs into Rhino and use that as a base for your line work. So I'll show you how to do that. Um, we'll go over some basic commands like distance, I'll go over a couple of curve commands for drawing curves that I like to use, and then how to edit those curves, how to add some dimensions. We can review hatching, and then we can do a couple of 3D commands that are kind of off beside the point. But one in particular I want to show you guys is the sweep command. So we'll do that. But first, I have this simple file here. You can see how I have it organized. I decided to go for David. Always wanted to draw David. So I brought in an image in Rhino. You can do that. So there's a couple keys. So the command is called picture plane. It's usually, or picture frame. So you click on that, and I have an image on my desktop, David, and it has to be, I believe it has to be a JPEG for it to come into Rhino. But this is often really helpful, and then it will ask you to scale it. I'll just hold down the Shift key to get it aligned to the grid. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you very much. So you can bring it in, you can drag it around, but the important thing is, especially if you guys use this for your anthropometric diagrams, is that you need to make sure that you set the scale of your images, right? So we'll assume that David is a perfect 6 feet tall, and I have already scaled this one, and I've set up my grid, so you can see that he's kind of aligned to this grid, and he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet tall. And remember, you can use the grid command to go ahead and set that up. Right now I have my snap spacing at 1 inch, my minors at 1 inch, and my majors every 12 minor, so that would give us a foot. And yeah, so like that. I really like to stress getting your grid set up. It helps a lot. And how I like to scale is give yourself a reference. So I will draw a polyline, snap to the grid, and then I will offset it 6 feet. And then I can use that. So I can move David down, get his feet right here. Maybe I'll split the difference. I'll make a new polyline for the vertical. And then I'll use the scale command. There's scale 1D if I wanted to stretch this picture, scale 2D, and scale 2D works fine here, but scale 3D works fine here as well. And I'm just going to use these reference points. And I'm going to start from that base. I'm going to snap. So I have my scale factor or first reference point. So I'm going to use a reference point. which is the top of his head, and then I'm just going to scale that up to that top line. Okay, so now I have a 6-foot David, and I can check that. Some of you are asking me if you can measure things, so you can type in the distance command, and I can just double check to make sure these two lines are the right distance apart. So that distance is 72 inches, which is 6 feet. I also know because I have my grid set up. So it would be nice if you guys could find for example, for your site model, you could find the grid, the underlying grid that this building is organized on, and you could use that for your site model. I'll give you a hint. It's in the break lines in the concrete. Okay, and you can also create dimensions, and that's a really handy thing, as you know, for your anthropometric diagrams, right? There's going to be some dimensioning going on. So you can come up here to your dimension drop-down menu and do a linear dimension, and it's as simple as kind of clicking on what you want to measure and then dragging that over, so that we can get rid of this other line work here. And now we have a 6-foot dimension line. Now you can change those properties in the scale of that dimension by going up to your dimension styles, and you can change everything from the type of head on that line to well, this is for leader. That's for a leader arrow. For a call out, we're not using those, although you could. We're using our dimension arrows here, but also for all of the text size, and you can customize every little detail of this dimension line through this. Okay. The size of the text, the precision of the dimension. The format, you can change it to decimal, fraction, feet and inches. I like to use feet and inches myself. So that's dimensioning. Now, as far as, I'm just going to leave this set as is. Now, as far as rules for dimensioning, just kind of general layout rules. Choose 2 sides of your drawing to dimension. So, for example, we could dimension the top. So if we wanted to get a shoulder width on David, we can type in dim for dimension. I'm going to hold down the shift key to get to turn ortho on. Now I'm going to pull this up. So you always have your dimensions on 2 sides of the object. This is just some kind of basic rules of dimensioning. The dimension line, this extension line here, shouldn't interfere with your object. Should stop shy, right? Stopping shy of the shoulder, stopping shy of the head here. You can change this up if you need to. Let me. Okay, great. And then if you have more than one dimension, it's really good to nest those dimensions. So for example, if I wanted to show length of leg, I could would start down here at this same point, go up to his, maybe his hip, and then I can drag that over. And then maybe I wanted to show from hip to shoulder. And then maybe shoulder to crown. So the smaller dimensions are nested within the larger overall dimension. And it's really nice to now, you could break this down further. So for example, I wanted to dimension the foot to knee, and knee to hip, right? So you start to get a whole family of dimensioning there. And for our sake, we can be a little redundant. A lot of the times, if you're dimensioning a building, you try not to include redundant dimensions. For example, this dimension is not necessary because you can simply subtract 1 foot 9.5 inches from 3 feet 5 1/4 to get this dimension. So usually we're not. Usually we have as little information on there as possible. But for this project, I think it's perfectly fine to do that. Now I can go in and start to organize my dimensions. I can get in there and I can turn points on. So I can use this. Where is it? Here. And I can grab these points and I can move them however I want. But I think it would be nice in this case to snap them to the grid. So I will do that. And then just like when we were hanging our drawings up on the wall the other day, it's nice to get some consistent spacing. So I'm just going to maybe put 2, 4, 6 inches in between these various dimensions. And then we can snap these guys over as well. I'm just using the space bar to turn those points on. That's the repeat last command, right? And I can drag all of those dimensions around. And then remember I told you that you had control over the extension lines, so if I wanted to pull that up, I could, so that it didn't intersect that drawing. And say I wanted to pull this one over a little bit, do that as well. Is there any questions about dimensioning? This is kind of a little crash course on dimensioning. You guys will have lots of practice within this assignment to get it down. Okay. So that's a picture frame, or picture frame, distance, dimension. I wanted to go over a couple different curves or way to draw curves. So let's talk about that really briefly. On this image here, I've went ahead and have drawn some curves, and so that you can get a idea of that. These red curves are using the interpolate point command, and the green curves are using the control point curve command. And I like to use those two for drawing. One's for tracing, and then one is for, well, one I like to, the interpolate point, I like to use that for tracing. So we can try that a little bit here on this David. You'll get the hang of it as you do this a little bit more, but if I want a profile of David, I can trace him here, and the nice thing about this is that you get a really nice clean line that you can then scale. It's all vector based, right? So I'm going to turn my points off, or my grid snap off, and so for this one, you'll get the hang of it as you get more practice. But basically, as the curvature tightens or loosens up, that's where you want to insert your points, your control points. But the nice thing about this is it doesn't have to be perfect. You can always go in later and kind of start to develop this curvature and fine tune it. Right? But this interpolate curves command is really handy for tracing an existing line. If you need a sharp edge, you can stop that curve and start a new curve, and then you can always join them, right, into a single open curve. Okay, for the green lines over here, I started to articulate some of the body massing, and so that's not unlike the line work that you see in the anthropometric diagram in the example, right? So you're starting to articulate some body massing and get some really nice clean shapes out of that. So I'll kind of redo this upper torso here. And for that, I will use the control points curve. And I like to just get you can do this quickly. And then C, enter for close in the end. And then once I have this general shape, then I can go in, I can use that same command, that points on command, and I can open up these points and start to manipulate and refine the curvature of that region. Right. That's your points on command. That is right here. And to get out of that, you can just hit escape. But now I can push and pull on these points individually to establish some regions. You can do the same thing with the other curve, the profile curve that we were creating. So you can also get in there and fine-tune that curve as well. Any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward. But I think this is a nice way. I think I mentioned to you before that I like to draw in Rhino more so than in Illustrator, and this is how I'm comfortable with drawing. So, but it's obviously it's up to you in your own exploration. Okay, Um, the last thing, and then you can see here I've started to develop the figure a little bit. If we turn the background image off, you can see I started to create a wireframe of the spine and the shoulders, the hips, have the outline, but then I've also started to develop some massing, start to hatch the massing. So you can start to understand how you can develop a nice set of figures for your diagramming needs.